I had to decide between forgiving my sister or exposing her biggest secret. I grew up thinking the world was divided into rules and punishments. In my house, under the shadow of our father's strict gaze, even breathing the wrong way could get you into trouble. I'm Yasmin, 22, the good daughter, the one who followed every rule, never raised my voice, never disappointed. And my sister Zara, well, she was a storm in human form. Even at 19, wild and unpredictable, the kind of person you love and fear in equal measure. Our family wasn't like most American households. We were Muslim, devout in the way that made every choice measured, every action observed, and every mistake a potential disaster. My father was the law here, an unshakable authority figure whose word was final. He wasn't cruel in the way most people imagine, but controlling. That was a gentle word for the iron grip he had on every detail of our lives. Curfews weren't suggestions, meals were dictated, phone calls were monitored, and heaven forbid anyone ventured outside the lines. I'd always followed the rules without complaint. I was proud of it, even if it made life feel suffocating. And then, one ordinary Thursday night, I discovered a secret that shattered every certainty I had about my family, my sister, and the life we were supposed to live. It started when I went to Zara's room to borrow a scarf. I knocked politely, but the room was silent. I pushed the door open slowly and froze. There, on her bed, were clothes. Clothes she'd never dare wear in our father's presence. Crop tops, ripped jeans, skirts that barely brushed her knees. And then her laptop was open. A chat window flashing messages from someone named Jake. My heart skipped. I didn't mean to read them. I told myself that. But curiosity isn't polite, and the words leapt at me anyway. She was talking about meeting him at a cafe, laughing about sneaking around, about the thrill of doing something forbidden. And then, the biggest shock, she had photos. Pictures of herself dressed in ways that would make our father's head spin. Selfies with friends at parties I didn't even know existed. Every word, every image, every tiny act of rebellion. This was a life she had hidden from me, from everyone, and it was exhilarating and terrifying all at once. My first thought, tell our father. Of course I did. That was what a good daughter would do, right? Protect the rules, uphold the family honor, make sure everyone stayed in line. But, and this is the part I couldn't admit to myself at first. I couldn't, not yet. There was something in those messages, in the way Zara laughed at life, that made my chest tighten. Not with anger, but with understanding. I wanted to confront her, to yell, to cry, to demand answers, but I was also scared. Scared of what would happen if she knew I'd seen all of it. And maybe, deep down, scared of what would happen if I told our father. I could imagine it all, lectures that lasted hours, punishments that lingered for days, her hiding in her room, me keeping quiet, trying not to breathe too loudly, too visibly, too human. So I waited, and in that waiting, I noticed things I'd never paid attention to before. Zara wasn't just reckless, she was careful. She hid notes in books, used burner apps on her phone, timed her outings to the second. She wasn't careless, she was smart. And she was lonely. I could see it in the photos she sent to friends, the small smiles that didn't quite reach her eyes, the way she always looked just a little out of place in her own skin. The first time I confronted her, it was inevitable. I had to say something before the tension ate me alive. Zara, I said one evening, trying to keep my voice calm, even though my hands were shaking. I saw your messages. She froze, mid-laugh at her phone, and I thought I saw fear flash across her face. And then, just as quickly, defiance. You what? She said, not afraid, just daring. I didn't mean to, I stammered. But I saw all of it, the parties, the pictures, everything. There was a long silence. I braced myself for a storm, for yelling, for our father, for punishment. Instead, she laughed. Not a cruel laugh, but a shaky, nervous laugh, like someone trying to hide how vulnerable they were. You're supposed to tell Dad, aren't you? She asked. I don't know, I whispered. I should, but I can't. I don't want to ruin you. Her eyes softened for a moment and then hardened again. You know what it's like, she said quietly, being me, every day, pretending to be something I'm not. Following rules that make me feel like I'm not alive. And then it hit me. She wasn't just breaking rules for fun. She was surviving. She was creating little pockets of freedom in a world that demanded obedience and silence. And for the first time, I wondered if maybe the rules themselves were wrong, not just her for breaking them. That night, I lay in my bed and couldn't sleep. I thought about all the times our father had lectured us, all the rules that made life feel like a cage. I thought about Zara's small acts of rebellion, about the laughter I'd heard behind closed doors, about the way she carried herself like she owned her choices even when she had to hide them. And I realized something terrifying. I admired her, not just because she was brave, but because she reminded me what it felt like to be human, to make mistakes and still feel alive. But the guilt, oh, the guilt was suffocating. I had been raised to believe that protecting the family's honor meant exposing secrets, reporting missteps, never turning a blind eye. And here I was, protecting the biggest secret of all. Every time I saw her texting, planning, sneaking, I felt like I was betraying my duty. But every time I thought of turning her in, my heart ached for her. We argued a lot after that, sometimes quietly, sometimes loudly, words spilling like knives between us. I told her she was reckless. She told me I was blind. I said she didn't understand consequences. She said I didn't understand life, but beneath the anger, beneath the tension, there was something else. Connection. A bond that was stronger than fear, stronger than guilt, stronger than rules. One night, she caught me staring at her laptop again. I thought she'd yell, thought she'd call me a traitor. Instead, she said softly, "You know, I don't want to hurt you. I don't want to destroy this family either. But I can't stop being me. Can you understand that?" And I did. I really did. For the first time, I questioned everything I had been taught. Maybe it wasn't about right or wrong anymore. Maybe it was about being human. Maybe it was about forgiving, understanding, and choosing love over fear. I don't know what will happen next. I don't know if I'll ever tell our father, if we'll ever find a middle ground, or if our lives will shatter in ways I can't imagine. But I know this. Zara isn't just my sister. She's a person with dreams, mistakes, and freedoms that belong to her. And for the first time in my life, I feel like maybe we both deserve that. I stayed awake that night, listening to her soft breathing down the hall, and realized something that changed everything. Maybe the world my father built wasn't the world I wanted to live in. Maybe the rules weren't the only way to measure right and wrong. And maybe, just maybe, protecting my sister, protecting Zara, was the first step toward finding my own freedom. I've always been told that life is black and white, right and wrong, obedience and rebellion, good daughters and, well, the rest. But the more I sat in my room that night, journal in hand, the more I realized life is not neat. It's messy. And sometimes, the hardest decisions don't come with instructions. I opened my notebook, the pages worn and waiting for confessions no one else would hear. "Dear Journal," I began, though I doubted it mattered if anyone ever read it. "I don't know what's right anymore. I want to do the right thing, but what is the right thing? Telling Dad will destroy her. Protecting her feels like I'm betraying everything I was taught. How can loyalty to family and love for my sister demand opposite things?" I paused, pen hovering over paper because the words themselves felt heavy. I couldn't just write about rules or duty. I had to write about Zara, her laughter that never quite reached her eyes, the way she tiptoed on the edge of danger, the way she carried secrets like armor. I wrote until my hand cramped, until the quiet of my room swallowed every thought. The next day, Zara caught me at the kitchen table, scribbling in my journal like a criminal hiding contraband. Her dark eyes narrowed, but she didn't say anything. She just leaned against the doorway, arms crossed, and waited. "Why do you always write like that?" she asked finally, voice softer than I expected. I don't know," I admitted. "I just think better when I write." She tilted her head, a faint smirk tugging at her lips. "You think too much," she said. "Maybe you should try living a little." I laughed, though it sounded hollow even to me. "Living a little doesn't feel safe," I said. "Safe is what keeps us out of trouble. You know that." She shrugged, stepping closer. "Safe isn't living." "Yes, safe is existing. I don't want to just exist." And there it was, the truth I had ignored, the reason I couldn't just turn her in. Her life wasn't just reckless. It was her way of surviving, of finding color in a world our father painted in gray. For the first time, I really looked at her. Not my sister who broke rules, but Zara, a young woman who wanted the same thing I secretly wanted, but had buried under obedience: freedom. Over the next week, subtle signs of her rebellion started showing in ways I hadn't noticed before. Her hairline teased with tiny streaks of color, small slips about friends I hadn't met, outings she'd helped with homework, but clearly didn't. And Dad noticed too. He tightened the reins even more, calling curfews early, scrutinizing our conversations, insisting that obedience protects honor. I could feel the tension curling around the house like smoke. Every glance from him felt like a warning, every word like a test. And in the middle of it all, I was protecting Zara. I kept her secrets, covered for her, lied to my father, all while trying to convince myself I was doing the right thing. Zara noticed, of course. One evening, she cornered me in her room, frustration and vulnerability mixing in her voice. "Yasmin," she said, "why are you helping me? You're supposed to be the perfect daughter. Don't you care about Dad? Don't you care about what he'll do if he finds out?" I swallowed hard. "I do care," I said. "I care about you more." She laughed, a shaky sound that carried more pain than amusement. "You don't understand. I'm tired of living in a cage. I'm tired of hiding everything. I just want to be me for once." And I finally understood, not as a sister who must protect the rules, but as someone who'd always felt suffocated by them too. I nodded, tears threatening, and said, "I get it. I really do." From that moment on, we started small acts of defiance together. Nothing dangerous, just enough to remind ourselves we had a choice. Sometimes we stayed up late listening to music in a room when we should have been asleep. Sometimes we left the house for a walk under the pretense of errands just to breathe outside without Dad's shadow over us. Every act, no matter how small, felt revolutionary. And every time, our bond grew. We laughed, we argued, we shared stories and dreams, and slowly we learned to trust each other in a way we never had before. But the danger never disappeared. Every small victory carried risk. One afternoon, Dad walked past Zara's room and noticed her books were slightly out of order, his brow furrowed, suspicion flickering in his eyes. That night, he asked both of us 100 questions, testing our honesty, our composure. I felt my chest tighten. One wrong word could unravel everything. But I stayed calm. I covered for Zara silently, keeping my heart pounding while she smiled, pretending innocence. And somewhere in that chaos, I realized something fundamental. The rules themselves weren't fair. They weren't protecting anyone. They were stifling, controlling, and suffocating. I had been raised to follow blindly, but now I saw the cost of obedience. It wasn't just my life, it was Zara's. And protecting her, standing by her, wasn't just an act of love, it was a rebellion against a system that demanded conformity at the cost of happiness. By the end of the week, I made a decision. Quiet but profound. We couldn't keep living like this. The rules weren't protecting us, they were imprisoning us. And maybe, just maybe, the only way to survive and thrive was to create our own path. One that didn't require hiding, lying, or fearing every glance from our father. I didn't know how or when we would do it. I didn't even know if we could. But the seed had been planted. In the middle of fear, of tension, of moral dilemmas that made my head spin, I knew one thing for certain. Zara deserved freedom. And for the first time, I wanted it for myself too. I closed my journal that night, the quiet of my room wrapping around me like a fragile shield. For the first time, I felt hope. Not the cautious, obedient hope that whispered about safety and compliance, but a real, reckless hope. And it was terrifying and exhilarating, and exactly what we both needed. We sat in her room, silent for a long time, just listening to the sounds of life outside our windows, and I realized something that made my chest ache with possibility. Maybe the world our father had built wasn't the world we were meant to live in. Maybe the rules weren't the only way to measure right and wrong. And maybe, just maybe, standing by each other, even against him, was the first step toward creating a life that was truly ours. Rebellion doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers, quiet and careful at first, barely noticeable. But in our house, even whispers could become thunder. By now, Zara and I had learned how to move like shadows, careful not to get caught, careful not to breathe too loudly, careful not to betray each other. And yet, as exhilarating as it felt, the tension in the house was growing like a storm on the horizon. It started small, really. One Saturday morning, we decided to leave the house under the pretense of errands, just the two of us. A coffee shop in the next town over, a bookstore that wasn't on Dad's radar, a quiet park where no one would notice us. For the first time, I felt the air on my face without the weight of fear pressing down. Zara's hand brushed mine as we walked, a tiny act of solidarity, and I realized something. We were alive. Really alive. After that, our little acts escalated. We joined a local art class, something our father would never approve of, and spent hours painting and drawing, laughing when our mistakes became accidental masterpieces. Zara signed up for online writing workshops, and I secretly cheered her on, proofreading her stories while marveling at how bold she could be with words when no one was watching. Every day was a rebellion, every choice a small victory, and every lie to our father felt like a dangerous thrill. But with rebellion comes risk. One afternoon, we were returning from a bookstore excursion, books hidden under our jackets, when Dad appeared at the front gate. His car door slammed, and I could feel his eyes on us like lasers, piercing through the summer heat. My heart pounded, my palms sweat, and for a split second I thought we were done for. "Where have you been?" he demanded, voice tight and controlled, like he was ready to explode at any second. I froze. Zara froze. And then instinct kicked in. I stepped forward, chest trembling, but voice steady. "Dad, we went to the bookstore, that's all." He didn't lower his gaze. "Without telling me?" His voice rose, sharp and unforgiving. "Do you think rules don't apply to you?" I swallowed, trying to keep the panic from making me stammer. We just wanted to experience something outside the house. We didn't mean to disobey." His eyes narrowed. "Experience? You live under my roof and you follow my rules. That is your life. Do you understand?" I did. I understood. But I also understood something else. We couldn't live like this anymore. Not really. The suffocating obedience, the fear, the constant monitoring, it was killing us, slowly and silently. Zara squeezed my hand under the table later that night, whispering, "You did good. You stayed calm." I nodded, but inside I was shaking. Calm didn't erase the fear, didn't erase the guilt that came with lying to protect her. But somehow, in that moment, I felt a spark of pride. We were fighting, not with fists or weapons, but with courage and wit, and it was enough. We continued our rebellion, carefully, strategically. Zara started going to a nearby college class for art, pretending to study from home. I helped her manage her schedule, keeping track of our little deceptions like a secret code. We went to concerts under the guise of volunteer work, stayed up late watching movies we weren't supposed to see, and experimented with our own sense of style, small but meaningful acts of independence. But the house pressure was escalating too. Dad's control tightened, his suspicion a constant weight. He asked more questions, scrutinized our every word, and sometimes, late at night, I could hear him pacing, muttering about disobedience and dishonor. I felt the guilt claw at me constantly. Was it worth it? Were we being selfish? One evening, it came to a head. I was sneaking Zara out to a small poetry reading downtown. Everything was planned. Timing, route, alibis. But fate has a way of testing resolve. Just as we were slipping out the front door, Dad appeared, blocking our path like a wall of authority. "Where are you going?" he demanded, voice icy. My heart pounded so hard I thought it would crack my ribs. Zara looked at me, panic flickering in her eyes. I could see her questioning me silently. What do we do now? I swallowed the fear, straightened my back, and met his gaze. We just want to go to a poetry reading. It's nothing wrong, Dad. We'll be back before dinner. He stared, his face undull, unreadable, and for a terrifying moment I thought he might strike. But then he turned and walked away, muttering something about irresponsibility. Zara exhaled, a mix of relief and admiration in her eyes. That night, I couldn't sleep. The adrenaline had left my body trembling, but a new feeling had settled in, resolve. I understood now that personal happiness mattered, that choice mattered, that freedom mattered. We were alive, and we deserved to claim it, even if it meant breaking every rule we'd been taught to obey. Over time, the rebellion brought us closer than I'd ever imagined. Zara trusted me with her fears and desires, her small victories and secret heartbreaks. I began to share things too, my own dreams, the parts of me I had buried under obedience. We laughed, we argued, we cried, and through it all, our loyalty to each other became unshakable. And that's when the thought first appeared in my mind. Terrifying, daring, impossible. We couldn't stay here. Not like this. The house, the rules, the constant monitoring. It was a cage and we were suffocating. Freedom wasn't just an idea anymore. It was a need, a calling we couldn't ignore. So we began to plan. Quietly, carefully, like strategists in a war we had to win. Where would we go? How would we live? How could we make it without exposing ourselves before we were ready? Every detail mattered. Every risk was measured. And through it all, I realized something profound. Leaving wasn't just about escape. It was about claiming our lives, our identities, our humanity. I didn't know exactly when we'd do it. I didn't know if we'd fail or if the world outside would be kind to us, but I knew one thing. Staying under oppression wasn't living. And standing by each other, truly, fiercely, without fear, was the only way we could survive. That night, Zara and I sat in her room, planning quietly by flashlight. Maps, bus routes, ideas scrawled on sticky notes, lists of supplies and potential jobs. The excitement was palpable, but so was the fear. I felt it in my chest like a heartbeat out of sync, reminding me that this wasn't just a game. This was our lives. And as we huddled together, whispering our plans, I realized something I hadn't fully understood before. Loyalty to each other outweighed obedience to any rule. Love outweighed fear. Freedom outweighed everything. For the first time in my life, I felt like we were not just surviving. We were fighting for something real, something precious, something that belonged to us alone. And that realization, terrifying as it was, felt like hope. Hope that we could leave. Hope that we could live. Hope that we could finally be ourselves. By the time I went to bed that night, my heart was full of adrenaline and fear, but also a strange, electric excitement. We had made a decision, silent, daring, and irrevocable. We were leaving this house eventually. We were claiming our freedom. And nothing, not rules, not fear, not even the weight of tradition, would stop us from fighting for the lives we deserved. The night we left, I couldn't feel my hands. They were shaking so badly that I almost dropped the backpack I had packed for Zara. We had spent weeks preparing, planning every detail, memorizing bus routes, and stockpiling the little things we thought we'd need. Clothes, money we had saved secretly, notebooks, a few sentimental trinkets. Each AITA item felt like a lifeline, a tiny token of the world we were about to claim for ourselves. Zara, on the other hand, was calm, almost unnervingly so. She had that defiant sparkle in her eyes, the one I'd seen countless times before when she skirted the rules and won. She nudged my shoulder, whispering, "Relax, Yas, we've got this." I tried to breathe, but it was like the air had turned to stone. One step outside and everything we had known, everything that had kept us safe, gone. But at the same time, I felt a rush I hadn't experienced in years. Freedom. Real freedom. Not whispered in stolen moments behind closed doors, but raw, immediate. Hours. The walk to the bus station felt eternal. Every creak of the floorboards, every flicker of light from the street lamps, every distant car engine made me flinch. I kept expecting to hear Dad's voice behind me, commanding me back inside, warning me of the consequences. But he wasn't there, and we were moving. The first bus ride was surreal. Zara leaned against the window, staring at the blur of houses and trees passing by, and I sat beside her, trying to process that we had actually done it, that we weren't just sneaking or hiding or pretending anymore. We were leaving everything familiar. The city we arrived in was overwhelming. It was big, loud, bright, alive in a way our small, controlled world had never been. We didn't have a place to stay yet, and the uncertainty gnawed at me. But Zara grinned, full of energy, and suddenly uncertainty felt like possibility instead of fear. "Come on," she said, tugging me along. "This is our life now. Let's live it." We found a small hostel for the first night, and it was cramped and noisy, but it didn't matter. That night, I lay in the top bunk, staring at the ceiling, listening to strangers breathing around me, and realized that fear wasn't controlling me anymore. It was replaced by something heavier and more beautiful: hope. The following days tested everything we had prepared for: finding work, navigating unfamiliar streets, figuring out food and money. It was overwhelming. We encountered moments of doubt too. times when I wanted to turn back, times when the city's enormity made me feel small and helpless. But Zara was always there, steady, reminding me why we were doing this, why freedom mattered more than fear. One afternoon, as we were walking back from a cafe where we had spent the morning planning budgets and jobs, I caught Zara staring at the skyline, silent. "What are you thinking?" I asked. She smiled softly. "I'm thinking that it's worth it. Every risk, every lie, every secret we kept, because we're here, because we're alive, and because we chose us for once." And it hit me. The weight I had been carrying all these years, the fear of punishment, the fear of failure, the fear of betraying Dad's expectations. I realized that carrying grudges, holding onto anger, even silently resenting Zara for making us both risk so much, it would have trapped me forever. Forgiveness wasn't just about her. It was about me too. I forgave her for every secret, every rebellion, every fear she had forced me to confront. And in forgiving her, I freed myself from the guilt I had carried. We grew into our new lives quickly, in ways I hadn't imagined possible. Zara found a small art collective that welcomed her energy, her talent, her boldness. I started volunteering at a local library, rediscovering my love for words and quiet purpose. We shared meals, laughter, tears, and dreams. Each day was a lesson in resilience, trust, and independence. And every night we lay in our tiny room, exhausted but alive, realizing that we were building something permanent, something real, something ours. The challenges never fully went away. There were moments of doubt, bills that didn't add up, strange faces that made us nervous, nights when we argued over trivial things. But in each of those moments, we learned. We learned how to compromise, how to protect each other, how to survive without fear controlling every breath. And then, the most important lesson of all, that family doesn't have to be defined by walls or rules or obedience. Our bond didn't weaken, it strengthened. We redefined what family meant. It wasn't about punishment or honor or control. It was about love, trust, forgiveness, and the freedom to be human. Zara and I even dared to have fun in ways that had been forbidden. We went to concerts, museums, street festivals, small road trips, moments that should have been ordinary but felt extraordinary after years of restraint. We laughed louder than we had ever laughed, danced in ways our father would have called inappropriate, and allowed ourselves to dream beyond the boundaries that had once confined us. One night, sitting on the fire escape of our small apartment, I watched the city lights flicker below us and realized how far we had come. I thought about Dad, about our upbringing, about the fear that had dominated my life for so long, and I didn't feel anger anymore. I didn't feel guilt. I felt gratitude. Gratitude that we had each other, gratitude that we had survived, gratitude that we could forgive and move forward. I turned to Zahra and whispered, "We did it. We're free." She grinned, nudging me playfully, "And this is just the beginning." That's when I knew it was true. Freedom wasn't just a physical state, it was a choice, a moral compass we set for ourselves, a declaration that we would no longer live in fear of punishment or judgment. We were our own women now, with our own rules, our own lives, and our own moral code. And so here I am, writing this, telling you our story. Not as a cautionary tale, not as a confession, but as a reminder. Forgiveness is powerful, courage is contagious, and freedom is possible, even when the world seems stacked against you. I forgave my sister, not because she needed it, but because I did. And together, we built a life full of joy, adventure, and love that had been denied to us for far too long. We learned that life isn't about perfect obedience or living under fear. It's about embracing imperfection, chasing happiness, and creating bonds that can't be broken by rules or authority. Zara and I are still learning, still growing, but for the first time, our lives are ours. And that is everything. So to anyone reading this, protect your loved ones, forgive generously, and never let fear dictate your life. Sometimes, the hard choices, choosing love over duty, freedom over fear, are the ones that define you. And sometimes, standing together with the people who matter most is all you need to truly be alive. We are free, not just in the literal sense, but in our hearts, our minds, and our spirits. And for anyone who has ever felt trapped, unheard, or confined, you deserve this too. You deserve to forgive, to fight, to choose, and to live your life fully, just as Zara and I finally did. All right, that's it for today. I hope you enjoyed the story. We have so many more amazing stories coming your way, so make sure you hit that subscribe button. Our goal is to reach 100K subscribers by the end of this year, and we'd love for you to be part of this journey. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next story.